Welcome back. We're live on Channel 5 with Anna and Shay, and later we'll be asking if hormone replacement therapy for menopausal women should be free on the NHS. But now, do you back the motorists who removed Insulate Britain protesters from the road?
Move that way. Move. It's an ambulance. Sorry, mate. Why would you? Mate. Right, ambulance. Go. Mate. Go.
As you can see, they're furious drivers dragging the activists out off of the road in South London where they had been blocking rush hour traffic. The environmentalists were also blocking an ambulance, and you can see here a paramedic was seen helping motorists clear the scene of protesters. Now, it's expected that later today, Home Secretary Priti Patel will announce plans to hit these environmentalists with a new type of ASBO, and in an attempt to stop their motorway protests. Now, it comes as legal experts have raised concerns about motorists taking matters into their own hands and saying that they could be at risk of being arrested themselves. So, do you back the motorists, Shay?
I completely understand why they are doing this, and my blood is actually boiling watching those scenes right now, Storm, of the fact that even a paramedic has had to get out of his, car or van to come and move these individuals. They have no regard whatsoever for the people who desperately need medical help. They need to get to hospitals, and they're just blocking these roads. So I understand why these motorists are doing this themselves and dragging these people off the streets. My only concern is if you're on a motorway, what's the number one rule we're always told? Do not get out of your car. I wouldn't get out of my car because it could well be that a motorbike is coming and you won't see them, and it's game over for all of you.
There's definite safety concerns, but Anna, from the criminal barrister's mindset,
well, the first question is where are the police?
Yeah.
So, it's all right, Priti Patel saying that she's going to have new laws and everything, all utterly meaningless. These scenes, which I agree, absolutely make my blood boil.
It makes me sick.
Where are the police? You've got a paramedic there. Yeah. So presumably he's gone on his radio to back to his control room.
Yeah.
Where are the police? Because if the police were there, they would be doing that. And I understand. And this is wrong on so many levels.
Oh, there you go. There's the police. There's a couple of them.
Good.
And they are actually moving them out the way.
Well, of course they are. Because there's nothing wrong with protest. It's right in a democracy. People should have a right to protest, but that is not protesting. There's a very big difference between taking to the streets and being cross about something and trying to change the views of government, or it might be a business you don't agree with its policies and so on, and doing something which actually hits real people going about their lives and going about their business, and, as we've seen, sometimes taking people to hospital. But the other great tragedy of all of this is that the headline isn't, do you support what the cause is? It's, do you back the motorists?
Exactly.
And so they've got it wrong on every level because they've got the wrong tactics and they've lost what they're meant to be doing, which is persuading people to back them.
No one cares now, quite frankly, about insulating their homes. They could not care at all, let me tell you. If someone was to pick up the phone and call me and say, Shay, do you want to insulate your home? I don't even want to talk about that because the conversation has moved so drastically. If you really want to change people's minds, look at what happened only 2 weeks ago. You had Global Citizen Live. Millions of people across the world were looking at these fantastic concerts were taking place to try and raise awareness about climate change. That's probably had more positive impact than this, where motorists are being sat in their cars.
Yes, but has it had more of an impact? Because we're not talking about that, and we're talking about these protesters, whether it be the motorists or not, and the protesters themselves and their supporters would perhaps say that the ends justifies the means. And I'm happy to say that joining us now, Liam Norton from Insulate Britain is with us. Liam, thank you very much for joining us. So you're not getting a huge amount of great press at the moment. Do you think this is taking away from your cause somewhat?
I keep appearing on interviews such as this, and I say it isn't a cause. And there's a real the information isn't being conveyed properly. So I wonder if the panelists have read the report released by Chatham House last week. And it says this, that if emissions do not come down radically by 2030, 10 million people a year will experience heat stress exceeding the survivability threshold. Now, I'd like to ask the panelists, do they understand what survivability threshold is jargon for?
Do you want to tell us? Because this has got nothing to do with what you're talking about.
Yeah.
So I'll answer your question when you actually tell us what that means. Because you throwing these big words doesn't actually make
Can't you
any
answer the
difference to
question?
somebody. If I can finish my point, it doesn't make any difference to somebody who's been
asked you a
sat in a
question.
car for 3 hours. How is that going to make them insulate their homes?
No, I asked you a question about what survivability threshold means.
Tell us.
It means that they're going to fry to death.
Okay.
Right.
And what has that got to do with an
That's in
individual
10 years.
now?
That's in
What has
10
that
years.
got?
That's in 10.
What has
That's
that got
in
to
10
do
years'
with
time.
somebody now on 2021, on the 5th of October, who is actually being affected, can't get to hospital? You've got paramedics who are trying to move your protesters out of the road. They could die now. So why is anyone going to think about 10 years when, guess what? They're dying right now because of your actions.
Are 10 million people dying now?
So for you, 10 million people matter more than one person. Let me ask you this. You've asked me a question. Let me ask you this. If
You don't think 10 million people matter more than one person?
If you allow me to finish, if your mother was in an ambulance and she needed to be rushed to hospital, are you telling me you wouldn't move out of that road to allow her to get to hospital?
Let's look at another fact.
Answer
in
my
that
question.
report.
Hold on,
Let's look at another fact in that report.
Hold on, I'm going to stop you there, Shay. Hold on, Liam.
Let's look at another.
Liam, hold on, I'm going to stop you there as well. And I'm just going
Why don't you want to talk about the
No, why
reality
don't you
of the
want to talk
situation?
about what you're doing? Answer the question. What would you do, your mum? Very simple question. Answer it.
I'm saying to the government have a responsibility in this, and they could
Answer
end
the
it immediately if they gave us a meaningful statement.
Okay, Liam, I can see that you're not going to answer that question. Now, as you mentioned, the government needs to make changes to their policy and they need to start moving to insulate homes. That's what you want to see. And I think we can all agree that better insulation in homes is what is needed.
Absolutely.
Why aren't you targeting DEFRA? Why aren't you targeting ministers? Why aren't you targeting people specifically that can make the changes instead of the general public who are just suffering at the hands of what the protesters are doing?
Well, Anna said earlier that this isn't protesting, and I entirely agree with her. This is about civil resistance. This is about what's right and what's wrong. And I'd like to ask the panelists, they're credible journalists, they're intelligent people.
Okay.
Do they understand what global dimming is?
Oh, for
Do they
God's
understand what the carbon lag is?
No, because
Do they
you're not doing a
understand
very
what
good
the Arctic
job.
Blue Ocean event is?
Liam,
Do they understand that the Arctic is about to melt and we face an absolute catastrophe?
Liam,
and
I'm
we're
going to
talking
stop
about
you there.
traffic jams.
We're
talking about traffic jams.
You're not answering you're not answering our questions with all due respect, so we're going to not go into the jargon there.
Yeah,
I also want to put to you
the reality of the situation that we're currently in, which means millions of people are going to suffer.
Yeah, but
you're refusing to connect
other protesters
to that reality.
Liam,
you're refusing to connect emotionally to that reality.
Liam, other protesters who feel the exact same way as you about...
We're not protesting, I've just said, we're not protesting.
Other people who feel the exact same way as you are Extinction Rebellion, and one of their members, Roger Hallam, has said that he'd let your patient die, meaning the person in the ambulance. He'd be quite happy to block their road and let them die. How do you feel about that comment that's been made?
Yeah, it's an awful situation, isn't it?
It's a terrible situation, but it's the reality of what's happening. You're blocking roads, ambulances aren't getting through, and people are suffering.
I've just said to you what the reality is, and what the reality is what Sir David King says, is that what we do in the next 3 to 4 years will determine the future of humanity.
So why don't you target the people that can make the changes?
What bit of that sentence don't you understand? Why are you devoid of empathy when you can't connect to this reality that millions of people are going to suffer? And we have to repeatedly come onto these programmes and tell you that what's going on here is the destruction of our country. And you repeatedly, time and again, refuse to accept the reality of that situation.
Liam, you're missing... Liam, let me finish.
You'd be on the roads with us.
Liam, you're missing...
No, you wouldn't. No, you wouldn't.
Liam, you're missing the point, which is what you do. What you do is you're trying to educate people. That's apparently what you're trying to do. You're trying to change policy, educate people, and get action. You're trying to get action.
No, that's not.
And then you criticise people for asking you questions without understanding is that if you did your job better, we would understand and support you. But what you're doing is you are alienating the very people you're trying to persuade to do the stuff that you believe in. Don't you understand that? You're actually defeating your own object. You're pickling off millions of people, love.
No, you don't understand how power works. And we've got,
No,
we're
I don't.
saying
No.
to the government, we're saying...
What power have you got? You're sat on a road saying, we're not going to move now, do what you want. That's not power. If you've got real power, Liam, firstly, if you've got real power, you would be on this show showing empathy to those people who are working day and night trying to get to work or get home, who have lost loved ones because of the coronavirus pandemic, and actually just what they agree with what you're saying. It's not that, look, I don't disagree with what you're saying. The difference is you come here with such arrogance and say, the way that we're doing it is the only right way. Well, actually, I'm here to tell you that you're wrong. And people like you disgust individuals like us because your message is now being filtered out. No one cares about what you are trying to say. Ultimately, people are angered by you. That's not going to bring about change. Whether you think it is or not, no one is now thinking about insulating Britain.
You don't even insulate your own home, apparently.
Yeah, I mean, we're terrible hypocrites, aren't we?
Well, you said it. Well
no, I'm going to stop the panel there. I'm going to stop the panel there. I actually would love to touch on that with you, Liam, after the break. We have to hit a break, but I do want to talk about the issues with insulating your own homes as well. And also, if you could talk to a few of our callers, that would be fabulous. Will you stay with us after the break?
Yeah, that's fine.
Fabulous, Liam. Thank you very much. Well, as you've heard, we're going to be taking your calls on this. I know you're all very passionate. Do you back the motorists for removing the eco-protesters from the road? Should we leave it to the police? 0207 862 2222 is the number that you need. See you very shortly. Hello again, Anne and Shay are with us this morning. Later we will be asking if women should have to pay for HRT. Plus, should the 36-year ban on drinking alcohol in football stands, should it be lifted? But now we want your calls on whether you back the motorists who have removed Insulate Britain protesters from the road, or do you think that we should just leave that to the police? Rezi, we're getting lots of calls on this, I hear. What are people saying?
Yes, loads of calls on this. So we're going to speak to Richard in Hampshire first, who thinks the motorists were correct.
Oh, Richard, you are supporting the motorists?
Yeah, 2 points, actually. The first one, because you've talked about the motorists and then you've talked about this climate change issue. First point is there is a thing called citizens' arrest, yeah? So these people were committing criminal offences because it's an offence to walk on the motorway. We all know this, and obstruct motorways or roads. Therefore, citizens' arrest, you can do it, within certain parameters.
But Richard, the police were there, so shouldn't we just be leaving it to the police to make the arrest if indeed the police think that's appropriate?
Well, actually, can I talk? It's an interesting point because what a previous chief superintendent in the Daily Mail, about a week ago or 2 weeks ago, was saying these people are committing criminal offences. Why didn't the police, and they've got units, they've got anti-glue stuff, come along, take them off and remove the people from the roads? If I was to go out on the road and do a protest down here, I can assure you the police would be straight down and I'd be in the nick.
What do you think about this, Anna?
Richard.
So the police are now... Hang on, let me finish.
Go on then.
The police are getting into a very dangerous situation in today's world where they're tippy-toeing around all these people with their protests and not enforcing the law. And we've got to make our decisions on whether we want policing or whether we don't.
Thank you,
now,
Richard.
The other thing is...
So, just hold on, just on that point, Richard.
It's just this. I mean, Richard makes a really good point, but there's a big difference between the police removing, or indeed anybody else, removing somebody from a road because they're obstructing the motorway and arresting somebody. So I don't think you'll find those are what we call arrestable offences. And yes, a citizen can arrest somebody, but it has to be in very specific circumstances. The most interesting of which is breach of the peace. That's personally what I would do to get people, if you needed to arrest them. But removal is the first thing that they do, and you don't need to arrest somebody to remove them. The arresting bit is after you've actually got them off the motorway or the road. And Richard's right, it is an offence to obstruct a motorway, to obstruct a highway. It's not, I don't believe it's an arrestable offence, but that's kind of not the point. I think he's right. The police need to be far more proactive in allowing people to go about their ordinary business.
OK, thank you, Richard. Do we have anyone else on the phone?
Yes, we're going to speak to Dave in Merseyside now, who thinks the motorists were right to move the protesters.
And David, do you think you're on the side of the motorists too?
I'm definitely on the side of the motorists. I think these people are selfish and arrogant, which was said before, and to try and have a conversation with that Liam chappie, you could see just how arrogant these people are. They don't talk with you. They don't have a discussion. They just talk at you and try and bully you into listening to their point of view.
But Dave, most of us would agree with the cause. Liam, are you listening to this? You're starting to turn off people that agree with the cause. They're just starting to turn off with the way that you're conducting things.
I said earlier, it isn't a cause, is it? It's a physical reality. And it's a reality that Chatham House, in its report, it says this, that there's a 95% chance that we're going to go over 2 degrees. And as a lawyer, does she know that the British government have a legal duty to keep below 2 degrees C? And we've just heard that there's a 95% chance that they're going to go above it. And does she know what the consequences of a 2-degree world are?
Do you accept that you are losing?
It means billions.
You are losing the
billions of
public
people will
votes,
be
Liam.
displaced.
You are losing the
billion-
public's attention. The attention is now on your disruption rather than what you're trying to achieve. Do you appreciate that? Are you accepting of that?
Yeah, I accept that there's a consequence to the disruption, yeah.
No,
but what I'm saying is that there's a consequence to 2 degrees C, and it means 1 billion people will be displaced.
Most
That's
people would
100
understand
Syrians.
that. Most people would
They don't
understand that.
understand it, unfortunately. But I'd like to ask Anna, like, in terms of the British legal duty to stay below 2 degrees C, and we've just heard that there's a 95% chance that they're going to go over it, and what that means legally for the UK government.
Liam, I'm not. Nobody here is doubting what you're saying, but you're. If I may, honey, let me just finish. Just let me finish this point, right? So nobody, as Storm has just said, nobody's questioning your argument and what you're saying. What we're questioning is that you're getting in this show alone, loads of people saying, you know what, I'm not interested in any of that. So you're losing what is in many ways an absolutely winnable debate because you're employing the wrong tactics. You're pickling people off instead of winning them over so we get the change. Do you not see that,
tactics?
You don't get that,
I can see your point.
Oh,
no,
good.
I do get it.
Right.
But what I'm saying is those tactics have been used for 30 years and they're ineffective.
No.
The reason people don't like what we're doing is because it's effective.
No,
but why can't you respond to the legal...
Lovey, it's not effective because you're turning people away. That is not effective.
In defence of Liam, lots of protesters in the past have disrupted things and had to disrupt things for real change.
No.
Suffragettes being one of them. Lots of people didn't like them at the time.
No, I'm sorry. The suffragettes and others did not protest by gluing themselves to motorways.
They did chain themselves to rails.
Yes, but they didn't stop people from getting to their work. They didn't stop ambulances from getting through. And that, I think, this is a different sort, as Liam says, very different sort of direct action. And it's not lawful and it's not successful either. And at the end of the day, that's what you want in any campaign. Success.
OK, well, Liam, listen,
historically illiterate, Anna. That's historically illiterate to suggest civil resistance doesn't work. Why can't you talk about the British government breaking the law in terms of 2 degrees C?
Well, because, Liam, the debate's moved on and it's now actually about the protests. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your point of view. We are going to take more of your calls after the break. 0207 862 2222 is the number you need, and we want to hear from you on this. Welcome back and thanks for being with us this morning. Former Tory Minister Anna Soubry and broadcaster Shekhar Gurewal are with us, and we're going to be taking more of your calls now on whether you back the motorists in removing Insulate Britain protesters from the roads, and we're asking, should we be leaving it up to the police? Now, you heard from Insulate Britain's Liam Norton earlier. We heard quite a lot from him. So now we're going to hear from you. A couple more calls, Rizzy.
We're going to speak to Pete in Nottinghamshire now, who doesn't back the motorists.
Oh, OK, Pete, so you're in support of the protesters then?
Good morning, panel, and especially yourself, Storm, and congratulations on your recent marriage.
Oh, thank you very much, Pete. So, the protesters...
You're gorgeous yourself, and you're a very handsome husband.
Thank you. Right, back to the topic at hand here. Pete, would you be on the roads with the protesters?
I think they should have been arrested for doing it. It's common assault.
For pulling them off? Yes, it did look quite violent, didn't it?
It's common assault, as simple as that. If you lay your hands on people and start dragging around, that is common assault. The police should have arrested the motorists.
But they were trying to get the pedestrians off the road to make way for an ambulance.
With all due respect, the question was, were they right to do it? No, they weren't. It is not their job. It is the police's job. There were police there. That is their job. They committed common assault and should have been arrested for it.
And do you think the police are doing enough?
I think the police are in a very awkward position. Very awkward position.
Okay.
I especially, the guy who said that if somebody dies in an ambulance, that's okay. I think he didn't just shoot himself in the foot, he shot his legs off and shot the movement's legs off. Stupid thing to say. Absolutely stupid.
Do you think this is the right way to protest, Pete, or do you think they could be attacking it from different ways?
If you protest outside the House of Commons, you're kept a certain distance away, and it does no good whatsoever. So I can understand why they did it, why they're doing it, but it is backfiring on them. There's no doubt about that.
So
they're not getting the public on side with it.
Pete,
I agree with that.
Can I just ask you a question? You mentioned there that the actual motorist should have been arrested. Well, let's not forget, when we saw that footage, one of them was a paramedic who was there to help save lives. So are you saying that when he was helping assist take these protesters off of the road, that he should also have been arrested for what he did?
I'm saying everybody who manhandled them was committing common assault and should have been arrested.
But Pete, had that been your daughter, your mother, your loved one, that the paramedic was trying to help and save, would you not understand why he's trying to move them off the road? The footage you can see right now.
That wasn't the question was asked on this. It was, do you think the motorists were right? And I'm answering that question.
Okay, one of those motorists was the paramedic.
Other questions, because that wasn't the question.
Well, one of those motorists was a paramedic who clearly is there trying to help save lives. Perhaps he needs to get to the hospital. He's got the ambulance. He's probably got somebody there who's in urgent medical need of attention. And you don't support that at all. You can't understand, perhaps even empathise with where he's coming from, why he's trying to clear the road.
I've already told you that I think they're shooting themselves in the foot. So don't get me down, dragging me down to one particular person. It's about
one of the motorists, and he is a motorist, and he's considered a motorist by law. So.
I think what Pete's touching on there is a very difficult discussion, because on the one hand you are allowed to protest, but on the other hand you're causing mass disruption and potentially risking somebody's life. Thank you very much for your call, Pete. Anybody else?
Yes, so we're going to speak to Angela now in South Yorkshire, who thinks the motorists were right.
Oh, Angela, you're another one in support of the motorists. There seems to be quite a lot of you this morning.
Yes, and it's not just for the reason of them being moved. It's I didn't like Liam's comment. You know, he said that somebody in an ambulance, if basically, so be it. If they're on the way to the hospital, if they die, they die. That's, you know, one person's life at the side of...
I don't think, Angela, I'm just going to pick you up on that, because I don't want to misquote Liam, and I don't think that was his comment. I think what he was saying is they're protesting against something that could cause more deaths.
One person's life at the side of 10 million. Yes, he didn't actually say that's why he... But it was sort of implied round the edges. And what I want to know is, why is 10 million people's lives down the road in 100, 200 years' time that we're not going to know? We're never going to meet them, not going to know who they are. Why are their lives more important than the one person's that's on the way to the hospital that's already here?
Well, I think, Angela, there are children and our grandchildren, and we're supposed to be preserving the earth, aren't we, for future generations? So it's an aim of making sure that there is an earth.
At the moment, it's still no more important, because they're not even in existence, so you don't know if they're going to be here, to the person that's already here.
No, I think...
So he's losing everybody. I agreed with him years ago. I don't agree with him now. I think he's just... it's totally lost my track of thinking. I care about what's happening today. And then going up to 2%, what about China and all the rest of them?
That's a separate argument. I understand where you're coming from, Angela, but that is a separate argument.
And Angela, I mean all of us we all want to leave the world in a better state than the world that we inherited. In other words, we do care about the world that our children and our grandchildren will live in. But in any event, actually climate change is happening now, and it's affecting all our lives now, never mind the generations to come. And I think we're under an absolute duty to sort it out now.
But I think this goes to prove that actually Angela is one of those people who Insulate Britain has lost her vote.
Yes.
And thank you very much, Angela, for coming on and sharing your point of view. I think we're going to have to move on now. So I'll tell you what's coming up on the rest of the show.